Welcome to Break the Pipeline, brought to you by the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC. I am Sauda Johnson-McNeal, the founder and CEO of the firm. I've been an attorney for over 20 years, and I'm licensed in New York and California.
Hi, I'm Naomi Barrera. I am an attorney licensed in the state of New York, and like Sauda, I have also been practicing for over 20 years.
At Break the Pipeline, we dig into the real-life factors that shape children's lives. As attorneys, we analyze all sides, the legal intent and the real-life impact.
From school discipline and child labor to family conflict and mental health, we explore how laws and decisions can influence the path a child takes.
Our mission is to understand what affects kids and how we can help move them forward. This is Break the Pipeline.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Greetings. My name is Sauda Johnson-McNeal, and I am the founder and CEO of the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC. And I really want to welcome you to Break the Pipeline. I've been an attorney for over 20 years. I'm licensed in both New York and California, and our firm represents the legal rights of young people. We really work on education. It could be special education. Also in this area of civil law, we may represent children who have been abused or discriminated against, even if they are not falling under the special education umbrella.
Hi, and I'm Naomi Barrera. I am an attorney in New York for over 22 years. Sauda and I actually met a long time ago in law school. Today, we've brought our experiences together to help children and their families in this educational field.
Nay, it's good to be working with you again.
Sauda, blast from the past. Oh my goodness.
Who would have known? So just to give everybody a little background, so this is episode 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And today, of course, we'll get into what we're talking about. But before we jump in, I think it's important for everybody to know the history, right? Because as Naomi said, we know each other from a long time ago, which was law school. I pretty much saw her and I'm like, hey, we're going to be friends. No. And we studied for the bar together in New York. And that I think that really bonded us.
That and some other things, but yeah, that especially.
But then after that, both of us decided to open up our own law firm together. So we're business partners in New York, and we did that right out of law school. And we just have been kind of running the law game for a long time now. So this is exciting to be working together again at the firm and on this podcast, Break the Pipeline.
We are excited to bring our unique experiences together to benefit everyone that joins us. Right now, there's so many issues happening in the world. But our focus, if we want to focus on the children specifically, there's just so much going on. And so we want to spend special attention to today's school shootings, right? Everything from Columbine to Uvalde. And most recently, the shooting on a college campus in Utah of Charlie Kirk, which has been all over the headlines. This is not going to be a political podcast. We understand that everyone has their own views and their own ways of viewing the world. We just want to offer some facts, some realities that are present today that impact our children. And hopefully with this, we will be able to inform the families and give them some tools to hopefully ensure that everyone has a successful future. That is our goal. And so let's get into this.
Yeah. So really, if you think about what this podcast is, it's basically taking on issues that shape young people's lives, right, Nate? So this could be immigration, sex trafficking, as you already said, the school shootings. So we're here to talk about what impacts children and families, whether it's in the U.S. or around the globe. But first, I kind of want to dive into break the pipeline, right? What does that mean? Because a lot of people have heard of the term, the school to prison pipeline. And so the idea is that certain school policies, suspensions, expulsions, they push kids out of the classroom and into the justice system. Okay. So when we decided to name this podcast, Break the Pipeline, every topic is not literally going to be on, this is about kids going from the school to prison pipeline, right? We just thought that it's a great idea to break the cycle of what is impacting our kids and stopping them from succeeding in today's society. But we did want to at least start with episode 1, which will really talk about breaking the school to prison pipeline. Naomi?
So Sauda, break it down a little bit further, right? From the educational perspective, what is the actual on-the-ground impact of a school to prison pipeline as you understand it?
It really depends on what we're talking about when we talk about the impact. So for example, in this episode, which we have labeled school shootings in the pipeline, do our responses help or harm? We're talking about there's a shooting that happens and now there's a visceral reaction, right? It's going to be from either the parents who are sad, angry that their children have been murdered, for lack of a better way of saying it. And then you have the community and the school itself. So when you have all these different moving parts, it's really saying, how are we going to make sure this doesn't happen in the future? But what we also have to look at, these policies, they also impact these kids in the school system. Can you imagine when we were in school, if we were walking around and we saw gates to walk through where a buzzer goes off or police officers in our classroom? You're like, wait, I don't
No.
want to go to school. They
Right.
treat me like this on the street, so I want this in school. To answer your question, the impact is when certain policies are in place. Am I safe at school? Do I really want to go here? And if you're not in school, then there's a higher probability statistically that you might get into other things such as crime. We are the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC, and this is Break the Pipeline. So Naomi, take it away. School shootings, pipelines, do our responses help or harm?
So there's two different social perspectives, right? Two mainstream social perspectives on this. You have the parents who either lost a child or parents who now have surviving children that have to still return to these schools and the approach that they want taken. And you also have the social aspect of those that want the schools to still be a safe place, but also not to feel like a prison, as you mentioned earlier. For the purposes of this podcast, Sauda, I'm going to argue on behalf of the parents who either lost a child or have a surviving child. I have children myself, so this hits home personally for me. From a parent's perspective, you want your kid to be safe. So seeing a police officer, having quick response times when this threat of violence, that makes parents feel some level of protection for their children, right? What is the
Okay,
other side of it though?
let's talk about it because I also am a parent and I would also be very concerned, not just from the perspective of, like you said, my goodness, there's my child who is the victim and I'm upset, but also I'm the parent perhaps whose child was not impacted, being injured or killed during these shootings, but now my kid has to be subjected to all of the different policies in place. So now my child is getting frisked or harassed in the school setting. But before we even jump into that, Nay, why don't we start from the history? Let's go from the historical piece. So some of you may or may not remember that you had Columbine in 1999, and this is where two students opened fire and killed about 12 classmates and a teacher. You also have Sandy Hook in 2012, where there were 20 children and they were first graders, right? And educators were murdered. And then even as recent as the Charlie Kirk shooting in Utah on a college campus, it still impacted the students, even though they weren't young people as far as like being elementary school. These are still young people. This is still a college campus. So what happens is people now, like you said, they want to respond.
Right. So which is the correct path? Like most things happening in our country today, there's no clear answer. But parents who've lost children want someone to be accountable. Oftentimes these shooters, they are killed on the scene. But the problem remains. There's copycat killers that ensue. Obviously, after Columbine, like you just outlined, it has continued. And again, this is not a political podcast, but the question becomes having access to weapons, how does that impact the school system? That easy access. A lot of these kids have access because their parents basically took them to purchase these weapons. These children, most of the situations, these children who go into the schools to shoot have mental issues that could have been addressed in another form. So there is an argument to be made for having mental health counselors. But again, having restorative practices for some parents that lost their children is just way too abstract. They want to see tangible actions being taken by the school districts to ensure that their children are safe.
I hear you, Naomi, but again, let's go back to how you feel as a parent, right? I'm taking that position. And now I have my son and he's always being harassed. So now you have the shooting, They changed these policies. And so now you're allowed to frisk my child. Now you're allowed to search their lockers. Now you're allowed to have these police officers who are now harassing my child. He's scared to go to school. So looking for that from that perspective of the parent who's child is still at school. Now you're dealing with all these harsh policies, right? And the school's perspective is like, hey, these families want to make sure this isn't going to happen again. So we have to implement these rules. And that's where I think you talk about this school to prison pipeline, because nobody wants to be harassed. They're probably not going to want to go to school again. Nobody wants to be on their campus always being checked.
So the bottom line is the districts have a responsibility to take care of the children when they're in school. They have a they have a duty of care to protect these children. And so not putting parameters in place to ensure that these things don't happen again, they just wouldn't be able to do it. So a lot of schools have done everything from, like we mentioned, adding school resource officers. Some actually have actual police, new mechanisms for not being able to open the doors. And they've put these things in place. So they have to do that. Now, let's be clear. The Fourth Amendment has unreasonable searches and seizures that apply when the government seeks to unreasonably search a person, right? The districts don't have the same restrictions.
What about the 14th Amendment, right? We're talking about due process for these kids. If I'm still taking the position of the parent who has the children who's still in these schools and are being harassed, then what about like the legal protections to ensure that they have a fair chance to basically go against these school decisions that affect them getting expelled or suspended for the littlest thing because of these strict policies that are in place?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is this: the current climate that we're in, everyone would agree, right? I don't think anyone disputes that children should be safe in schools.
Right.
Again, the districts have a responsibility to take care of the kids when we send them to school for those 6 to 8 hours a day. The law gives the districts more leeway, if you will, to take certain steps that they feel are in the best interest of all the children. So depending on the state that you're in, the approach to certain children may be different. And that's the unfortunate side of this, right? Some kids are impacted even more than others, and for the sake of the overall safety of everyone. But I don't think the districts have the same legal limitations that, let's say, another government agency would have as to due process and even quote unquote illegal searches and seizures.
You're right. I mean, if you think about what the schools can do, the Supreme Court has ruled that there is no probable cause requirement for them to search these kids' lockers, right? So if we're talking about the legal side, then yeah, it's a much broader kind of standard that they follow. And we're also talking about like children with disabilities, right? The Individuals with Disability Education Act, for example, IDA, they also have certain protections already built in in terms of how they can be treated. So yes, I get what you're saying. The school districts, they do have more leeway. Doesn't mean it's right. I'm not saying that they're wrong per se, but I'm saying when we talk about this school to prison pipeline, there are going to be people who argue that it's wrong. And I mean, my thoughts are, why can't we talk about breaking the pipeline? I heard you talk about restorative justice. Why isn't that the solution instead of these
Yes, I think it's important that we have a balance. Criminalizing our students cannot be the approach. There has to be a balance. As we mentioned, mental health is a growing problem in this country, especially for young people. Everything from what happens on social media to what someone said about me to just self-identity, it's a growing problem. And so we have to have counselors and mediation and alternative methods of helping some of these children. Because remember, the same kids that commit these shootings are kids that were in these schools, right? Let's not forget that. And the bulk of them are doing it because they felt bullied, they felt ignored. And I think if we have mental health, if we have counselors that can address that head on, if they have a vehicle to be able to talk about their problems, we can probably avoid most of what's happened. But again, for parents who have lost someone, that's not enough. It's just
Yeah,
not
now I
enough.
was gonna yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, jump into that other side. And I'm all for alternatives. But yes, to your point, it's not enough when you look at the parent. Now I put my parent side on of being that parent who is the victim, right? Now I'm kind of walking in those shoes. And so now when we're making this discussion, it's like, absolutely not. Mediation? No. If you let somebody in who has a gun, then school, it's your fault. So no, I'm perfectly fine with having these barricades and these ways to search to make sure you're not gonna let someone come in with a gun. Because at the end of the day, my child will still be alive, right? So it like you said, it's that balance because on the one hand, you have these parents who are the victims, and then on the other hand, you have these parents, their kids are still being harassed on a daily basis, right? So it's like, what do we do? And how are we talking about breaking the pipeline when you have these very much conflicting kind of perspectives?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's definitely even preparing for this podcast, the idea of looking directly head on at the issues. There's no easy side to this. I think the best approach is just to do the best we can, honoring the parents who lost someone, honoring the parents who still have surviving children, honoring the children's rights that still attend these schools, right? Because we cannot criminalize the same children who were just victimized. A lot of these children themselves are going to have mental health issues as a result of experiencing these shootings. How can we criminalize them and victimize them again? So I think there's just no easy fix here, and it's just one school at a time. My hope is that this idea of school shootings is something that we can put behind us. But the reality is that school drills are a regular now in every school. School shooting drills are like my children have to experience that monthly in the event that an active shooter situation happens. That's insane. I can't imagine when you and I were in school having to think about this. Our concerns were, what are we wearing? Where's that cute boy? Oh my God, I have a
Right.
test. The issues that these kids are dealing with today, I cannot fathom having to be in their shoes. It's a crazy different reality. And so I don't think there's an easy fix. I think we can just, be informed, stay protected, and do what we can. What are your closing thoughts?
So look, there's always going to be the lawyer in me that is going to look at this, right? So as we already mentioned, there is the 4th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. That's going to be the argument of the kids who are there, who are still there. And then of course, like we already said, we have the Supreme Court basically allowing the district to have more access and more to be able to access to the lockers, more freedom to do things that these other families really don't like. So there's that legal argument. And I think it's just going to be a case by case scenario in terms of which law is going to trump which. But now, when we talk about an easy fix, I mean, I have some ideas. Perhaps there can be like a town hall where the families can come together, the ones who are the families of the survivors and the ones who are the families of the victims, and we can have input from them. So the school districts hear the different perspectives, and maybe there's a compromise somewhere. Maybe it's not as strict as locking the doors during the school day, but maybe it's not as strict as having them walk through the same metal detectors as you do when you're in court, but maybe there's something else that's like this middle ground where both parents on both sides feel comfortable. I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of at this time that could be a nice balance. The ball is in the court of the district to say, okay, we've heard both sides and we're going to come up with some policies that are really about respecting both sides and then maybe reducing this school to prison pipeline.
Thank you, Sauda. This was very informative. I do pray that, we do find a solution, and hopefully this is not a conversation that we have to continue to have. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. This is the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC, and we have brought to you Break the Pipeline.
Thank you, everyone.